Yeah, so today obviously you're here for how to build a meaningful KPI, key performance indicators, with Laura Hercalo. My name, of course, is Kayla. I'm your facilitator today, and I'll be helping out with questions and facilitating those for Laura. If you have questions or you just want to chat, just put in your inquiries into the chat or the questions window, and we'll get to them as soon as the presentation portion is done of this session. I'm recording this today, so everyone's on mute, just so we don't catch you off guard and you have a bunch of background noise happening. So yeah, so the recording will go out after this session. I think it's 2 days after it goes out to everyone automatically. And next week on Wednesday, May 27th, same time, we have a 2005 ByDesign release highlights that Laura will be doing as well. So I'll put myself on mute and then we'll just wait a few more minutes for other people to join us.
Hey, you guys are gonna be stuck with me for the next 3 weeks. And then also, in addition to the recording, we'll send out this presentation because it's pretty detailed that we're going to go through, and it gives you a nice step-by-step information on how to do what we're going to work through today. Just one more minute, and then we'll get cracking. All right, let's get started. I don't think anybody else is going to join us, and if not, that's their loss. Or if they did, that's their loss, so they missed out in the first couple minutes. So again, as Kayla mentioned, my name is Laura Hercalo, and I am the pre-sales director at VistaView. For those that haven't met me before, I joined VistaView about 2 years ago, again, more in the pre-sales role. So as an active customer, you might not interact with me on a regular basis. I do more of the demos and net new sales. So glad to be here and walking you through how to build a meaningful KPI. Again, as in net new sales, we like to make our dashboards very pretty with lots of colors and graphs and charts to try to draw people's eyes in. And it's, but at the end of the day, it's not really just the wow factor of that, but really how do we build key performance indicators to really get insight into your organization and the health of the organization, as opposed to and do that in real time, as opposed to running lots of different reports and trying to sift through information on a regular basis. We want to be able to, in an eye-catching way, be able to help you identify the problem areas within your organization, or the areas that are improving that you need to pat someone on the back for. And so today, I'm going to walk through the anatomy of a key performance indicator, showing you kind of creating the report views, creating the KPI, adding the KPI to the Launchpad and overview, and then we'll open it up for a Q&A. So here's an example of the key performance indicator. This is a KPI that's fully expanded, if you will. So as you drill into it from either a dashboard tile or on an overview screen, this is kind of what you'll see overall. So it's got lots of different content on it, which is really nice to give you sort of a one-stop overview of what's going on within a particular area within your organization. So on the general information of the KPI, you've got lots of different areas in here. Let's see. So one, as I drill into all the KPIs are created either as a key user from a report as you're in the Business Analytics Work Center. So you can create them just directly from a report that you've been creating report view, or you can go just straight from the Business Analytics Work Center into the key performance indicators and start from scratch there. So when you drill into the KPI information itself, you'll see sort of the backbone of what goes into this particular view. So I kind of married up here what you'll see and how it relates to the setup of the KPI. So one, you've got your current value, and you'll put in your the report name. The report can either be something that's already pre-existing that you've just modified your views to get the information that you want, your views and your selections, or you can create a whole new type of report that you want from scratch. And then you'll pick your key figure, so what you're basing that key performance indicator on, which is actually this value here, and then obviously whatever your selection is, so what I'm choosing. As an administrator, when you're in here, what's really nice is as you're sort of tinkering around with what you want in your KPI, you can just always pop in to view the report with the selected values that you have. So you always have a preview option in there, and then you can make your changes to the existing views and selections that you set up, or you can create new ones and then just modify them. So it's not like one of those things when you, in some cases in ByDesign, when you pop out, make some adjustments and they don't reflect in real time, and so you sort of refresh or save and close and back out and go back in again. Everything is going to be updated in real time. So it makes it pretty efficient for you to, like I said, to do a little tinkering around. So you'll also see in here the display name, and that will come up here in this this little overview. So if you've saved a view, I know for me, a lot of times when I've saved particular things that are specific to a KPI in an existing report, I'll put like KPI current year, things like that, and you don't necessarily want that on the title. So you can actually overwrite the title of the selection in there to make it a little bit more meaningful for what your users are actually going to see when they're popping this open. You can also set up the different value settings in here, and how your signs are presented. So like a sign presentation, like minus before the value or after the value. If you want to reverse the signs, this is always a nice one. If you're using things in payables, everything in payables always looks like it's going to be a net negative. And in terms, when someone's looking at it, they want to see it in a positive. So you can do that either directly through the KPI, or you can set that as a variable or selection, a setting within the actual report itself. And then you've got your value presentation. So there's some of these things don't necessarily work as you'd expect. So the value presentation is really not relevant. The currency, you want to set that actually in the report itself. That doesn't have any bearing on the KPI. And then the last part in here is really going to be that context report. So the context report means what's the viewer going to see? What's the person going to see when they actually drill into the KPI? What type of report they're going to actually look at? For me, again, from a demo standpoint, really nice to look at pictures and things like that, so I can get a quick view into this. You might find that it's more helpful to have all the numbers. There's different options in here, and I'll show you some different ones as we go into the live portion of this, where in the report you can actually display a chart with the data next to it, and that really gets you sort of the best of both worlds, so you can visualize trends and outliers while actually viewing all of the real data. And the same thing happens in the context report as well. So your view is going to be, again, the same as up top, or like whatever view you're going to actually choose to be displayed there, and then whatever selection. Again, rule of thumb, I typically, whatever value that I'm using or whatever selection I'm using for my current value, I'm also going to use that as the same for my context report. And then you can also change that display name as well. Excuse me. And then the different tabs in there. So that's more like on the general tab. So your overall, like what the basis for my KPI is. And then I've got the next tab, which are the values and the thresholds. And the values and the thresholds are really, one, what do I want to be at? Do I want to be at a set number? Do I want to be at a time over time comparison? Do I want to look at something and compare it to another report? Things like that. So that's how we set up this middle area as well. So that's going to be our target, where I can say if overall inventory, I want to keep it within a certain range, and that's how I'm going to, in this example, we're looking at an inventory target where I can look and see, you know, I want to keep this within $1.45 million, and then change my display name, again, looking at that. And then you've got a reference value. So what the reference value on the left-hand side is really how do I determine, or how do I let the system know I'm trending. So again, this gives you a really nice overall picture from one view of like, here's where I am, here's where I want to be. Am I doing well or am I doing not so well? And that little indicator line is a great reference for you to be able to further identify where you need to spend your time in trying to do some root cause analysis. So that reference value, again, you can use, so again, sorry, on the back to the target value, and you've got your different value sources in here, so fixed value, or you can use a different report. I use an example, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the same report. So you don't always have to compare reports, the same report within each other. I use an example of maybe travel. How much did I spend on travel? And I want to compare that to what did I budget for the year. So I might actually pull what my travel expenses are from one report, but then I can pull my plan or my planned expenses out from the budget. So you're not married to always pulling the same type of report. The same thing happens with a reference report. So the value source, I can get the value from a report, or I can set a particular threshold and set that guy up as well. And then last but not least, you've got sort of that tolerance. So that's where all this trending sort of comes into place as well. So I've got my reference point, and then what will happen as I set up the tolerance type. So again, I can set it up within a fixed value or a percentage. This tolerance will then calculate for me my trend line. So in this case, I've got a target of 1.45, and then I'm going to do a percentage of my total. And so if it falls within, so this is my reference point, and if my target falls within 15% of plus or minus of what that reference point is, it will show the different trend lines up, down, or sort of in the target zone. Okay. All right, and then depending on how you are setting up your KPI in here. So there's also, this is the threshold. So this kind of goes in line, the threshold piece goes in line with that trend line, where I can determine what's a green line, what's a red line, and if it goes up or down. So in the case of inventory, I want to minimize it. And so when I have something that's in the lower threshold of the target, it's going to give me a green line, but it's also going to go down. So in some cases, I've worked in systems that say if there's a decrease, it's always good, or if there's an increase, it's always bad. There's not a determination as to what's good and what's bad in their KPIs. And within ByDesign, I think they do a really good job to be able to allow you to specify where dictate your improvements or declines. And then in the thresholds too, you've got your value source of whether it's a percentage of the target value, or there's other options. Again, we'll go into a live demo in a little bit. And then for me, I always have trouble figuring out the warning points and the alert points in here. So I kind of put in this documentation in here when you're trying to minimize something, what the warning point, if it's great, the warning point will give you the alert. If it's greater, then it'll give you the alert. The alert point, if you're minimizing it, you want it less than the warning sign. So for the percentage points of when you want it greater or less, there's a checkpoint in there that you can always check, and it'll tell you where you want to be. All right. And then as we go on, there's additional context options in here. So as you drill into the KPI, you have the option to, as you're looking in here, you can jump straight into the report. So in essence, within 3 clicks or 2 clicks, you can go from the dashboard into a KPI, look at that overall view, and then go straight into the analysis pattern or into the report. Or you can also pre-set up different types of views and selections for your users to be able to quickly toggle in between different options. So as I mentioned before, it looks really pretty on a dashboard to have, you know, a quick view into trends and having charts and things like that. But a lot of people, as they start to dig into the details, they want to see the numbers and the figures behind it. So what you can do is actually position the nice looking bits on your KPI initial view, and then set up different views behind the scenes that a user can just do a drop down and toggle in between. And you can set up that on the additional context, and that's unlimited amount of different areas that you can set up. One of the newer features that came out in one of the last 2 releases are the filters and variants. And I highly recommend, if you are an organization that's a little bit more complex in nature, with a lot of either business residences, a lot of product categories, a lot of companies, or things like that that you're regularly monitoring but want to drill into a deeper level of detail just to hone in on something, use the filters and variants option. So what the variant does is it allows you to set up kind of you're pegging different KPI options to one master, essentially. So when I make an update to one, like in this example, I'm using business residents as a filter for my inventory. So I might set up, again, the overall to look at my overall perpetual inventory, but then I want my users to be able to drill into the specific business residents maybe that they're into. So I can set up one, and then every time I make an update, it'll update all the other variants that that exist within that KPI. So it makes updating and maintaining things a heck of a lot easier than creating 4 or 5 separate KPIs and having to remember to update them every time that you want to make a change to, like I said, like a chart graph or a view, or the comparison points that you're looking at. So in doing a lot of these, here's some of my little tips and tricks that I would recommend. For your basis reports or views, if you're going to do a lot of different context reports, or a lot of different views, a lot of different selections that you might want to have to make that, or you might actually have multiple KPIs that exist off of one existing report, I would just copy it and create it as its own standalone report as the basis for the KPI. Gives you a lot more flexibility as the administrator to make changes. And then because as you're creating these different views and selections that are specific to your KPI, you have to understand then that each of those selections and views are now become corporate views for your users. So in a lot of cases, like I'll just have sort of my list of KPI type basis reports. The access to the KPIs, obviously, because of how access context works in ByDesign, you want to control the access of the KPI. So they're only available to the users who have access to the work center views that you assign to the report. And so that's when you're actually creating the report. So you can, you know, obviously be cognizant when you are creating a new one and doing the assignment of the work centers to that standalone report. And then obviously it'll allow you to control the views if you have multiple admins, because if you do have multiple key users in your organization and someone says, oh, I don't like, again, the reason for creating that new view is because you don't want somebody going in as an end user and saying, oh, can you update this corporate view, or can you update this corporate selection, and make an update for everything, and then it jams up all your KPIs downstream. So again, that's kind of one of the basis for creating your KPIs as standalone reports. Again, for me, I find it very easy. I lay out my KPI sort of as a map, and I look at the context report, the basis, the targets, and things like that. And so I sort of map out how I want that KPI to look. And then I go in and I create all the views before I start creating the KPI. Because then, even though it's real easy to jump in and out of the views to make modifications, it's just easier for me anyway to visualize how that's going to look in the KPI and do it all at once, so I can just go in and pop through the options. Be descriptive about the reports and the titles and the views, so your users understand what the comparisons are and what they're actually in the data that they're looking at. always use relative selects on any dating variables that you have. So again, always one that I would absolutely recommend. And then last, if you are an organization that works in a multi-company or multi-currency, multi-company environment, and you do have multi-currency values, so if you're looking at the whole entire corporation and you've got a company in Canada and a company in the US and you do business in Canadian dollars in the US, when you create the KPI, unless you have a default standard currency in the selection of your report, you'll get like a little star because the system doesn't know how to parse out USD from Canadian dollars. And so that's another, it's another great basis for using those, the filters and the variants. If you do always want to be able to toggle between multiple currencies, have that set as a filter and then always have a standard default. All right, so I'm going to jump into, this is all basically for you, just giving you at the end of the day, how we can create the KPI so you can walk through that and kind of do one on your own. Some additional notes, and then again, we'll sort of jump into the system a little bit. SAP is consistently, which I find really nice now that they are deploying pre-configured KPIs to your tenants. So you will see if you pop into there and you haven't used this feature in the system, you'll already have about 30 different KPIs that you can use straight off the bat and start to consume them on day one. And then these pre-delivered KPIs, they can be copied. So you can just create one on your own. You can just copy it in whatever you want, or you can directly adapt it to your company's requirements. And then if you find that it's not working for you, reset it as needed. So there's this option, you know, if you created a KPI yourself, you would be able to edit at any point in time with the edit option. But if it's created by SAP, you can go ahead and just adapt through the adaptation or reset it back to its original pristine status. I know, again, from me in doing this, I'm very nosy about what SAP is delivering to me, and I like to keep a top of what we get. So I created a little save search, a little save view in here, filter that just says who it was created by, SAP. So anything that you've created as an administrator or anybody else in your organization, you'll filter those out, and then you can keep up to date with what's new and what's coming out within from SAP's side of the house. All right. So let's jump in, and we'll show you just a little bit on the KPI. Right. So the KPI that we were working with, or that I was working with, is the inventory value one, and you can notice that either the KPIs can be positioned, and I'll show you how to add these on. I'm doing a separate session on creating dashboards and other things, I think in 2 weeks probably. So we're taking whatever we do today and building on it to be able to deploy those to your users. But again, you'll notice in here the inventory value that we just created and how that's trending. As the users, as they sit on their dashboard, then they can jump into that context report. So it's that same view that we were looking at before. And then as the user, you've got your inventory report in here. And you'll see the different options that I was talking about, how you create those different context type reports. And so I've got my inventory report with the data. And so this was that one example. I said, you know, the charts are great, but a lot of people like to drill into the actual data itself. So that's where we can do sort of a side by side. And then if a user wants to filter out one of those or have both of them, they can just click onto the chart or the graph as well. So they've got a lot of different options in here for them to be able to view the different data. And then as we go into the analyze portion, that takes me right into the analysis pattern where I can start to do a deeper dive into the data. The other place that we can position our KPIs is really in any work center overview. So you've got your different overviews here, or there's also a new insights there's a new Insights Work Center that just came out again within the last 2 releases. So if you haven't seen this, this is a really nice tool for you to be able to, as an administrator, create lots of different dashboards for all of your users and deploy them out to the different roles within the organization. But if I'm sitting on just an overview screen as an example, from a KPI standpoint, so this is one of our, actually we'll just toss that inventory one in here real quick. And so as you personalize any of your dashboards, either the Launchpad or any of your other overview screens, you'll see again all of the KPIs that you've created will sit in and they'll pop into your dashboard. And you've got different options in here as I'm looking at and positioning a KPI onto the more specific dashboard. And I like these again better than the Launchpad because you can have more contextual information just right at your fingertips. And that's why I'm a big proponent of the Insights Work Center. But as we go into the actual KPI itself, there's the settings option in the bottom that allow you to determine if you want sort of a medium or a wide type card width, and then whether you want to display this this graph or chart or not. And then if you want to show any of the other additional values, so like your targets or references or things like that, you have 2 options, and then how often you want to refresh it. Obviously, you know, we're in a cloud solution. I always set immediate because I like to, when I pop into there, I always have the data available to me. So again, you'll see, there we go, that same type of report. But again, different from the dashboard or the Launchpad, whereas in the dashboard, I can see actually the full context of that report. All right. So again, as I'm coming into, you've got our design, our KPIs in here. And we've got our SAP ones, but we'll look at all of ours. We'll go to our inventory value. And with any of these, like for me, since I'm doing a demo, I create most of these multiple times. We've got multiple views, and I can always just pop in and preview it, make sure that it's the right option that I want. So I can pull that open and do any sorts of previews. But then as I pop in, we'll just show you the different options in here on the more so the values and the thresholds. So I think that's obviously that's the meat of the KPI, because I can pull the numbers in any sort of report. But when I can start to assess whether it's trending correctly or inappropriately, it's where I'm going to get the value out of the KPIs. So again, if you're looking at your target value, I either set a value that's provided or get the value from the report. More often than not, I'm getting a value from a report because I'm assessing a value of something, you know, not number or whatnot. So I want to always look at a trend of the same time frame, year over year, month over month, things like that, because it doesn't make sense if you think about January. My sales last year was $20 million at the beginning of the year. Obviously, it's going to be 0, so your KPI is meaningless until you're at the end of the year. So it's always good to find a report that can do those time over time type of assessments, and then use that value from the report. And again, same thing with that value source and the reference value. I typically always am gonna try to use the value from a different report, so I can look at the ending amount. In this example, I'm looking at this month over last month, just to see, am I making any improvements on a month-to-month basis. And then you can fix your value of the tolerances. So if it's, you know, within $10,000 or not, or $50,000, like maybe in here I want to say if it's within $100,000, that's going to be my tolerance. But or I can just do that percentage wise of if I want it above or below within the threshold. And then, as I mentioned, you've got things that you want to maybe keep in a particular range. So I don't know, again, inventory is a good example. I want to keep it, I want to make sure that I have enough to cover my sales, but I don't want to have too much that I have over inventory. So maybe I want to keep it within $3 to $4 million. And if it goes above, then I want to get alerted. If it goes below, then I want to dig into maybe I'm not making the right selections of products or things like that. And then as I change these around, so you can see like keep in range. So obviously it's going to give you all the different alerts and warning points if it goes above or below within the thresholds. And it's always going to guide you that it says, here's your alert point. So when it goes from red to yellow and then from yellow to green. So obviously if I'm looking at it on this stage, it's like, okay, if it's above 110% of that value, I want to warn myself. But if it's lower, so it's only 105%, I'm getting closer to that target. So let's move that within, then I'm within that range. And then you've got your maximize. So again, the system's always going to kind of alert you that point between of how you want to set those different thresholds. Okay. And then as I move into sort of the additional context, again, this is where I'm setting up those different views within that drop down. So next to the analyze data, I can use this as a drop down. And this is not restricted to the report that you're in either. So maybe you want to drop into, like in the inventory example, you might want to drop into the confirmation journal or something else that gives you a little bit more detail or just a different aspect of the inventory. Like maybe you want to look at the rolling comparison or something like that, so you can see potentially maybe the yearly trend on there. So like maybe a month over month trend. We can pull in lots of different information into there. And then here's where we get our filters. So now I can set up anything. I can add different rows, and here I set up just the business residence. And then the user can come in and select any sort of multiple values. And then as I start to add in new reports, this will basically map that filter to all of the different context reports. So what the reference value report, the context report, and the additional context report. So basically we'll waterfall that filter down into each of the different metrics and the other KPIs that are in there, so the user doesn't have to do it multiple times. Just makes it really, really easy to automatically set that up for everything to happen. And then you've got your KPI variance. So within here, again, that's where I'm setting up, all the different areas. And then I can set up sort of within this filter. So to the example of, we've got 3 companies that are set up. And so I want my user just to quickly be able to toggle between company 1, company 2, company 3. I can basically set that up in here. So maybe I've got 123, 124 as my other companies, and I can save that. So when my users go in, they'll see that as a drop down in the different options that I can filter against. And then as I'm going in and editing this KPI, I would just come into the filter values and select synchronize KPI. So when we go back into this, I should now see, you'll see that this type is now that filterable option. And when I preview this KPI, the standard KPI doesn't have this little option in here unless you set up the different filters. So now when I do have my business resident set up in here, the user can quickly pop in and apply that, so they can see all of the different options in there. And then if you want to set that up as a standard filtered view, we can just save that as so it's KPI, it's our inventory for P1100. Okay, so now this new KPI, even though it's exactly the same information that's popping into here, I now see that as the KPI variant off of that original one. So then when I just when I make an update to the master and say sync changes, all of these will then be updated with the data. So I don't have to go into each individual one and make it unique or make the updates, because that could be really hairy if you have a large organization. One of the other places too, as a key user, you can create a KPI from any of the reports themselves. So even let's say I'm in, maybe the purchase request and order report, and I want to look at maybe just my purchase order volume here. I can jump into my view. Oops, I have some key figures in here. Right. You'll notice, oh, actually, sorry. Wait a sec. Actually, you do have to do it from the Business Analytics Work Center. So if I'm in designing my reports, do that again. This one's load. All right. So let's pop it here, and we'll just edit that with the web browser again. So as that opens up for my last 12 months, and I look into my view and I can see my ordered net volume, what you'll see in your options here as you're in as the administrator, you've got the option to create the KPI. So this is just another way to easily, like I mentioned earlier, if I want to typically set up all the different views and selections of how I want to lay it out. Once I'm ready and I have my context report set up the way that I want to and I'm pulling the right data, I'll come in and just go ahead and create that KPI. And then I can either just create that, or then I can create and open the KPI itself. And so that'll pop me right into the workstation for me to go in and create those different, all the rest of the information that I need to support that KPI. Okay. All right. So like I mentioned in here, I did do, based on what I went over today, the KPI example scenario that you can actually use if you're tinkering around in here and you want to create your own. So there's a 3-step sort of option in it that you can use to set up. And so it should take you again step by step on how to create almost exactly the same thing. The one thing to note as you're doing the deployment, as a key user, you can deploy any KPI to the Launchpad, but that impacts all of your employees. If you're on the phone, you're not a key user, and you know your key users, and you want to tell them that they haven't played around with this kind of stuff yet. And again, we'll go through the dashboarding and how that works in 2 weeks. But you can impact how the Launchpad looks and what's there for all of your employees. You can deploy it to the Work Center overview pages, and that impacts all of your employees that have access to that Work Center view. Or you can also deploy it to the Insights Work Center as within a new dashboard configuration. And then as an end user, just on an ad hoc type basis, you can add it to the Launchpad. They can be added to the Work Center overview page if you have authorization to do it. So you'll see, as you're in your home dashboard, if you're doing the Launchpad there, you might see, you or your users might see a larger list of KPIs, because it's always going to be filtered by that particular Work Center's authorization. And then again, as the end user, if you're in the Insights Work Center, you can create your own dashboard with any of the KPIs that you have authorization to. All right. I think that will do it for my part. So we'll open it up, either open up the line if people want to ask questions directly, Kayla, if you know how to do that, or if there's anything in the chat that anybody has questions on.
I don't see any questions or anything in the chat or questions box. I tend not to take people off the line, Laura, just because it throws people off guard and then they don't know that they're unmuted.
Okay.
So there
So
is
if
a way
anybody
to
has
do it. It's
questions,
just, yeah. Go ahead. One person says, I don't have that work center of insights.
okay. Who's that from? Andrew. If you are not the key user and don't have access to the application and user management work center, go to your key user and ask for that. It's a new work center. Like I said, I think it came out in 2000 and release 20. I don't know, 1911. I think it was like in November last year that it was just introduced. So it doesn't automatically get appended to your user. Your key user has to go in and update either your role or your access rights to be able to put that in. But yeah, like I said, this is one of the newer features that I think is really, really useful. And it kind of went by the wayside because it doesn't just automatically show up and people have to know to get into it. Or to actually add it into your role. So go ahead and ask your key user for that.
They said, I am the key user. Do I have to push it out from application and user management?
Yep, absolutely. So you'll see that guy. If I go into my business users, and we'll edit our access rights. And you'll see down here, here's your little insights area. And then they can view, you can either just view their dashboards or their analytical list. So basically this is another area, just like in the homework center, your report list. This will show you all the reports that you have access to and then all of your dashboards.
He said, okay, perfect. Thank you for this.
All right, awesome. Well, if you guys have any questions or anything pops open or you need any help as you're diving into the creation of these wonderful, wonderful KPIs, don't hesitate to reach out to me, laura.hercolo@vistaviewsolutions.com. And like I said, we'll send out, I'll put my contact information at the end of these slides and we'll send them out to the attendees at the end of the session.
Great. Thanks, Laura. And just a reminder, register for next week's session, May 27th, for the 2005 ByDesign release highlights with Laura.